of Wa'il ibn Hujr Radhi-Allahu anhu. We had 2 sessions on him. Sahabi from Yemen, from the region of Hadhrat, therefore he was known as Wa'il ibn Hujr al-Hadrami Radhi-Allahu anhu. So today we will talk about one of the Sahaba from the Ansar, a great Sahabi. Very few people I know by his name, who go by his name. Very well respected Sahabi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with many unique qualities and characteristics. We're going to go over just a brief kind of overview of his life, inshallah, and then we'll go into some incidents and stories related to him. His name was Abbad bin Bishr Radhi-Allahu anhu. His kunya was Ibn-Bishr, and some say Abu Rafi'. Ibn-Bishr was his kunya, but he was not known by his kunya like many Sahaba were. He was known by his name Abbad bin Bishr. He was from the clan of Banu Abdul Ashhal. Has anybody heard the name of this clan before? Banu Abdul Ashhal. Very well-known clan. Many great Sahaba hailed from this clan. So as you know, there were 2 main tribes of Medina Munawwara. There was Banu Aus and there was Banu Khazraj, right? And these 2 tribes made up the group who we know as the Ansar. So every tribe was made up of many different families. When those families were very large and extended, they were known as clans. Banu Abdul Ashhal was a clan from the tribe of Banu Aus. And there was a very great Sahabi who was the leader and the chief of this clan, who was known as Sa'ad bin Mu'adh Radhi-Allahu ta'ala anhu. He's the Sahabi who, when he was martyred after the battle of Khandaq, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the arsh, the throne of Allah, shook by the death of Sa'ad bin Mu'adh Radhi-Allahu anhu. That's how great he was in the eyes of Allah and his Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, it's even mentioned that Sa'ad bin Mu'adh Radhi-Allahu anhu, when he was martyred, before he died, he was shot by an arrow in his arm and he was bleeding profusely. And everybody knew he was going to die, including Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told the Sahaba that he wanted Sa'ad bin Mu'adh's tent pitched in front of Medina, Masjid al-Nabawi, so that he could visit him often. Otherwise, the clan of Banu Abdul Ashhal lived far away from Medina Munawwara, so it would be difficult for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to visit him regularly. So he brought his tent close to Masjid al-Nabawi so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could visit him often. When he passed away, there was blood seeping out from underneath the tent. So Sahaba knew that he had passed away. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came into the tent, it was a big tent, not a small one. When he came into the tent, he was walking in a very funny way, as if he was trying to avoid stepping over things. When the Sahaba asked why he was walking in this way, he said the angels' wings were in so many places in the tent where Sa'ad bin Mu'adh radhiyallahu anhu's body lay, that he was trying to avoid stepping over them, and that's why he was walking in a different manner than he normally did. So even the angels were witness and present near Sa'ad bin Mu'adh radhiyallahu anhu after he passed away. What a great Sahabi of Rasulullah. He was the leader of this clan of Banu Abdul Ashhal. So there's a very famous hadith of Bukhari in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam rates the different clans of Banu Aus and Banu Khazraj based on their level of support for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And support doesn't mean necessarily financial support, emotional support, psychological support, any type of support that was helpful in allowing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to continue his mission. So all the Ansar were helpers, but some helped more. And based on that, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had like this kind of, you could say, levels of these clans. One were that there were those who were at the highest level, the elevated level. There were those who are under them, and then there were those who are under them. So there's this hadith of Bukhari in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, it's narrated by Abu Sayyid, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Khayru duwar al-Ansar Banu Najjar." The best of the clans of Ansar are Banu Najjar. Banu Najjar, they were located exactly where Masjid al-Nabawi is located today. Okay, not the whole Masjid al-Nabawi, that area where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's was buried. That area was Banu Najjar and nearby. Thumma Banu Abdul Ashal. The greatest clan after Banu Najjar was Banu Abdul Ashal. So Banu Najjar is the top clan, most virtuous, respected, honored amongst by Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then Banu Abdul Ashal, second. And then third, Banu Harith ibn al-Khazraj. And number 3, Banu Sa'ida. Those of you who've been to Medina Munawwara, how many of you have been to Medina Munawwara? So if you've been to Masjid al-Nabwi, if you look towards your west, okay, not the way Jannatul Baqi is located, the other way, you'll see a big mountain, even before you see Uhud. Mountain not too far off in the distance. Okay, that mountain is known as Mount Sula'a. Mount Sula'a. Okay, so Banu Sa'ada was located on the east side of the Mount Salah, and not too far away from where Masjid al-Nabawi is today. Okay, Banu Sa'ada was the clan of a very famous Sahabi, or also one of the chiefs of Khazraj, Sa'ad bin Ubadah. So they came fourth after Banu Najjar. Okay, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Fi kulli dur al-ansari khair." All the different clans of Ansar, they're all good, but of all these clans, there were 4 who were exceptional and outstanding in their support for Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the first of them was Banu Najjar, second was Banu Abdul Ashal, third was Banu Harith ibn al-Khazraj, and number 4 was Banu Sa'ida. Now, Sa'ad bin Ubadah radiyallahu anhu, when he heard this hadith, we would generally be very happy, right? He was not so happy. I mean, he was, yes, happy, but he was a little bit dissatisfied with the fact that his number came 4th. Banu Sa'ida came number 4. He wanted to be at the top, right? As we all would like our name to be on the top, right? Top of the list of everything that's good. So Sa'ad radiyallahu anhu, he said, "Ma ara Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam laqad faddala alayna." I see that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave others a higher rating than us. So somebody said to him, the words used in the hadith are faqila, meaning somebody said, it's not mentioned who said it, but whoever said it made a really good point. He said, there's 2 ways of looking at everything. You can look at it from the negative perspective, or you can look at it from the positive point of view. So the positive point of view is, look at قَدْ فَضَّلَكُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ, but He's also elevated you over most. You may be under 4 clans, but you're over all of the ummah. The whole ummah. And, by the way, there's not only 4 clans. There's at least 30, 40, 50 clans per tribe. Maybe even more. So he was only 5th in line. And then after that, there's all these clans that he ranks higher than. Right? So somebody is telling Sa'ad bin Ubadah radiyallahu anhu that you could look at it in this way as well. Instead of looking at those above you, look at those who are below you. Right? But maybe he was doing amal upon that hadith in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when it comes to matters of deen, always look at those who are above you. And when it comes to people, matters of dunya, then you should look at people under you. Because then you'll strive to become better in your deen. And if you look at people who are under you in your dunya, they have less than you, then you always appreciate and be grateful to Allah for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Right? And most often what happens is we are ungrateful, and the reason we're grateful is because we see somebody who's one level up from us because they got a nicer car, they got a nicer house, or they have more houses than us, or whatever else. Right? Because we're not looking at deen first, we're looking at dunya first. So our priorities need to be changed. Anyhow, so this is Banu Abdul Ashal, who's one of the highest ranking of the Ansar clans. And Abbad bin Bishr radiyallahu anhu was from this clan. He accepted Islam at the hands of Mus'ab bin Umair radiyallahu anhu. We all know Mus'ab bin Umair radiyallahu anhu, very well known Sahabi. So when some of the Ansar accepted Islam during Hajj season, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would secretly go to these different tribes. during Hajj season, and he would call them towards Islam. Now, he wouldn't go secretly. He would do it in public. Abu Lahab would follow him everywhere. But when the bay'ah took place between the Ansar and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam during the Hajj season, that was done secretly. Okay, so there's some people from Banu Aus and Banu Khazraj. There was about, I think, 11 people or 12 people. This was the 11th year before the Hijrah was made. Those 11 people requested Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, Ya Rasulullah, we don't know much about Islam. We're going back to Yathrib, which was the old name of Medina Munawwara, and we want to teach our families about deen, but we don't know much ourselves. So if you could send one of your students, right, one of the Sahaba who has good knowledge and who can teach us, and he's a good da'i, meaning he's good at interacting with people, that he can invite people in a very nice manner that people will, be attracted to Islam and will come towards the deen. Instead of saying haram, halal, this haram, that's halal, people are not going to come towards deen like that, right? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam chose Mus'ab ibn Umair. Mus'ab ibn Umair was only 19 to 20 years old at the time, very, very young, but one of his most trusted Sahaba. So he became the Qari. He was known as Qari, Mu'allim, the teacher. So he went out and he started calling people towards Islam. The first person who accepted Islam with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in that Hajj season, amongst those 11 people, his name was As'ad ibn Zurara. And Mus'ab ibn Umair stayed with him. Okay? As'ad ibn Zurara, he's an amazing Sahabi. It's said that he's the one who started the first Jummah. Right? So we'll talk about that inshallah after we finish with Abbad bin Bishr Radhi-Allahu. So anyways, Mus'ab ibn Umair stayed with As'ad ibn Zurara, and he started working on potential converts to Islam, people who are open to different ways, or who are not so strict on their faith and their idolatry that they would be not willing to listen to anything else. One of them was Abbad bin Bishr Radhi-Allahu. So he went to Abbad bin Bishr with Asad ibn Zurara secretly at night, because most of Yathrib was still not Muslim, and Abbad bin Bishr accepted right away. Now the interesting thing here is Abbad bin Bishr accepted even before his own chief accepted. The chief of his clan, who was Sa'ad bin Mu'adh Radhi-Allahu. And there's another very famous Sahabi who is also one of the most prominent members of that clan of Banu Abdullah Shal. His name is Usayd ibn Hudayr Radhi-Allahu anhu. Usayd ibn Hudayr Radhi-Allahu anhu. So these two, Sa'ad bin Mu'adh, Usayd bin Hudayr, two of the prominent leaders of Banu Abdullah Shal, had not accepted Islam. Abbad bin Bishr had. He didn't have the same level of influence as these two people. Therefore, he could not and was unable to influence Banu Abdul Hashal to accept Islam, but he was able to bring his own family into Islam. So his wife and his children accepted Islam, but not the rest. And the reason I mentioned this is very important. Every personality is different. Every personality is different. Some people have the ability to convert more people because their level of influence over more people. People like them more, people have more respect for them, they're more willing to listen to them. There are others who are more reserved, okay? They have a lot of knowledge and they can propagate it, but they just don't have that type of personality because they're more reserved people, so they can't really give da'wah to people. And if they do, they're a little bit too cranky about it. And you can't be cranky when you're calling people towards the deen. Cranky or a crankster, right? You can't be cranky. Like if you say to them, you've already asked me questions for 2 hours, I got to go to sleep. That's not a good da'i. A da'i is one who's going to be willing to sacrifice all his time, as much as you need, to bring you towards the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So, Abbad bin Bishr Radhi-Allahu was a different personality. When Sa'ad bin Mu'adh accepted Islam though, he went straight up. He came to his clan, Banu Abdul Ashal, and he says to them, listen, I give you a choice. You know me. Who am I? You are the chief. You are Sa'ad bin Mu'adh. What do you think of me? You are the most respected of us. Okay, I swear by Allah that I don't want to talk to any one of you for the rest of my life if you don't accept Islam and don't accept Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And within a moment, all of Banu Abdul Ashal, the whole extended family, this clan of Banu Abdul Ashal, all accepted Islam in a blink of an eye, except one person. So we're talking about 150, 200 people accepting Islam within a moment's notice. Right? As soon as he put up the ultimatum, they all accept Islam. Now, Abbad bin Bishr accepted Islam before him, but he was not able to hold the same influence because he was a different person, right? So everybody does work of deen in different ways and contributes in different ways. Abbad bin Bishr, how did he contribute? We'll talk about that, inshallah. He was, obviously, since he accepted Islam even before the Hijrah, because Mus'ab ibn Umair had left 2 years before the Hijrah, 1 or 2 years before the Hijrah. So he was already in Medina Munawwara, already laying out paving the road for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to migrate. Many people are accepting Islam. Abbad bin Bishr had accepted Islam during that time. So obviously, if the Battle of Badr took place in the 2nd year of Hijri, he was there. And if he was in the Battle of Badr, he was in all the battles. And so he was in all the ghazawat and many of the sariyat. Okay, so he's a veteran of the Battle of Badr, which increases his rank even higher, because all the Sahaba who took part in the Battle of Badr, we already mentioned many, many times, they are the highest ranking Sahaba. In fact, I was just reading in Siratul Mustafa that it was a habit of many scholars. There's about 43 Sahaba from the Battle of Badr whose names are mentioned in Sahih Bukhari. Altogether, there are 313 or 314 or 315. But Imam Bukhari could not narrate the names and the hadith of all those 313 because they did not fulfill his condition of authenticity for the hadith to be included in his book. Not the Sahaba themselves, but the chain of transmission. Okay? So he could only bring about 41 to 43. As a result, there's only 43 Sahaba from the Battle of Badr whose names are mentioned with their narrations in Sahih Bukhari. But some of the scholars have a habit of reading that as a wazifa for hardships. So those 43 Sahaba from the Battle of Badr, you read their names from Sahih Bukhari with those hadith, and then you use their name as a wasila to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove your hardship, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your dua. There's a book we have in our library. It has the names of 313 to 314 Sahaba from the Battle of Badr, and the book is very interesting because each page is just blank with the name of the Sahabi, no details, just the name of the Sahabi. So you just basically flip and you're done within 3 minutes with the whole book. But the purpose of that is to read the whole names all the way through. So go through 313 pages in like 5-10 minutes. And as you read them, then after that you use their name as a wasila to make dua. Because they were all accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, who knows, the Sahaba in the Battle of Badr, they can commit any sin that they want, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgiven them. That's how much trust Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam had in them. So he's from the Battle of Badr, so that raises his rank much, much higher. There's other things about him, just brief things that we're going to mention, and then we'll go into more detailed, inshallah, stories. In the Battle of Khandaq, okay, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't go home. Neither did any of the Sahaba ridwanullahi majma'in. Most of them did not go home because they were always keeping watch and manning the trench night and day. There was a qubba, like a pitch tent, which is larger. Qubba is like a larger tent as opposed to a khayma. Enough to fit like 5 to 10 people inside. That qubba was guarded by the Ansar Sahaba only. None of the Muhajirun. Muhajirun were by the trenches. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had set different responsibilities for all the Sahaba in terms of their groups. Okay, so Ansar Sahaba, within them, a specific group of them, one of them was Abbad bin Bishr, their responsibility was to keep watch over the qubba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam all night long. Why? Because on the other side of the trench, there is this confederation of different tribes. There was Banu Ghatfan, right? There was Quraysh, there was Qurayza from inside, and there was other tribes. They're all gathered together to finish off Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Muslims, right? And their horses, they would be on their horses and they would be walking on the sides of the trenches, waiting for an opportunity to jump the trench. So they're constantly walking back and forth or riding on their horses going back and forth, waiting for a chance. So that's why the Sahaba were always on guard. And night and day. To the extent that on the day of Khandaq, for about 15 to 20 days, there were many times where the Sahaba could not pray their Salah on time. So they had to, their Fajr was prayed on time, but their Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib were Qada. Zuhr was not prayed in its time. Asr was not prayed in its time. Maghrib. Can you imagine? They didn't even have a chance to pray their Dhuhr Salah, or their Asr Salah, or their Maghrib Salah with Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The Qada of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam too. Because constantly watching over what the tribes, the kuffar were up to. Constantly. So during that period of time, which was a lot of tension, a lot of anxiety for the Muslims, these people, the small group of Ansar, one of them was Abbad bin Bishr, was keeping guard over Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's qubba all night long, the whole night. And there was only 4 of them. Only 4 of them. One of them was Abbad bin Bishr. He took that responsibility on himself, which shows us the level of trust that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had in him, and the level of trust that the Sahaba had in him, that these 4 people were appointed specifically to protect Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam throughout the night. If you remember Hudaybiyah, right? There was a Sulh Hudaybiyah, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah took place. And in that treaty, there was a man by the name of Suhail bin Amr, who was a negotiator on behalf of Quraysh. And he was sitting and talking to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Abbad bin Bishr was there standing guard over Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam while the negotiations were taking place. Now the hadith is very interesting. It mentions وَهُمَا مُقَنَّعَانِ فِي الْحَدِيدِ. There's 2 people, Abbad bin Bishr and Salama. These 2 Sahaba, they were covered in armor. Covered in armor from head to toe. So Suhail came with on his camel, and then he alighted his camel and he started speaking to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. وَطَالَ الْكَلَامِ, and the negotiations went on for a long time. وَتَرَاجَى, they went back and forth. And sometimes Suhail bin Amr would get very angry with Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. وَارْتَفَعَتِ الْأَصْوَاتُ وَانْخَفَضَتْ. Sometimes the voices would get loud and sometimes they would become low. So at that time, Abbad bin Bishr started getting very angry with Suhail bin Amr. So whenever he raised his voice just a little bit, Abbad bin Bishr would say to Suhail, اخفض من صوتك. Lower your voice, dude. Don't raise your voice with Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Keep your voice low. So when voices were rising, it was really Suhail bin Amr who was raising his voice. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam didn't need to raise his voice. He wasn't of that type that he would just get angry over small things and raise his voice. He was saying, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And Suhail bin Amr said, what is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? We don't know Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Right? So he would get very harsh and tense and rude. So Abbad bin Bishr warned him. He said, you keep your voice low with Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Warning him. So after that, Suhail bin Amr learned his lesson. Because this man is full armor, he got 2 swords on him, and who knows what he's going to do. Right? But it tells you, he is at the forefront. In the battle of Khandaq, he was at the forefront. Here in Sulh Hudaybiyah, he's at the forefront. So his level of closeness and love for Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that he cannot even tolerate against Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam somebody raising their voice. Right? So imagine, if Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was with us, and there's some group of people that come along, and they start talking to Rasulullah, and they get a little tense and a little harsh, start arguing, and Sahaba were there, do you think they would tolerate it for even a second? Not even for a second, they would tolerate it. They would take out their swords. If you started getting too rough, they could not tolerate. Forget about raising your hands against Rasulullah, raising your voice was not tolerated. He was also one of the Musaddiqun. Musaddiqun were that group of people amongst the Sahaba in the 9th year or 8th year of Hijrah, actually 9th year of Hijrah, who were appointed by Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to collect zakah from different tribes. Okay? Now that was a very respected and trusted position because you have to deal with money and you have to deal with fard money. Money, that's what? Zakat money. right? You have to handle it very carefully. And you have to distribute it very carefully because you can't just give zakat to anybody you want, right? So here, he was given that responsibility, which tells you his closeness to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was a musaddiqun. He was appointed as his proxy on behalf of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to collect zakah from two tribes. Number one, Banu Sulaim, and number two, Banu Muzayna. Banu Muzayna, these two tribes. Last thing, he died at the age of 45. 45. In the Battle of Yamama. Does anybody know when the Battle of Yamama took place and who it took place against? The Battle of Yamama took place against the tribe of Banu Hanifa. During the Khilafah of Abu Bakr Siddiq Radhi-Allahu anhu. Remember that person, the impostor who made the claim that he was a prophet, Musaylimah Kadhab? He was from Banu Hanifa, and he led a large army from his tribe who supported him and believed in him to fight against the Khalifatul Muslimin, Abu Bakr Siddiq Radhi-Allahu anhu. That battle that took place between Banu Hanifa, Musaylimah Kadhab, and Abu Bakr Siddiq Radhi-Allahu anhu was known as the Battle of Yamama in the 12th year of Hijri, almost immediately after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I understood it to be the 11th year of Hijri, but the Rawaya I read said 12th year of Hijri. Now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away in the month of what? Rabiul Awwal, right? Rabiul Awwal, 11th year Hijri. So that means if this took place in the 12th, that means at least 8 to 9 months later. Because Rabiul Awwal is what? The third month of the Islamic calendar. So there's 12 months. So that means at least what? 9 months later, right? At least 9 months later. So he died in the Battle of Yamama in 12th year of Hijri, which means when he accepted Islam, how old was he? That's the reason why I mentioned this. So we have an idea of roughly when he became Muslim. So if he accepted Islam before the Battle of Badr, okay, which was the 2nd year of Hijri, he accepted Islam in the 1st Hijri, that would mean he was about 33, 34 years old when he accepted Islam. 33. So somewhere between 32 to 35, right? So it gives you a rough idea of his age at the time. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated and the Sahaba migrated, one of the first things Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did was what? He established ties of brotherhood, akhuwa, between the Muhajirun and Ansar. So who did he tie up with? Abbad bin Bishr Radhi-Allahu anhu. There's a very famous Sahabi, actually tied two Sahaba, not one. One was Salim and one was his Mawla Abu Hudayfa. Salim Mawla Abu Hudayfa. Okay, Salim Mawla Abi Hudayfa. Who was Salim Mawla Abi Hudayfa? He was one of the best reciters of Quran Kareem. Best reciters of Quran Kareem. Right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if you want to learn Quran, learn it from 4 people. One of them was Salim Mawla Abi Hudayfa. And that was a big accomplishment for Salim Mawla Abi Hudayfa because he didn't come from a noble tribe. He was actually a slave at one point in time. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to raise his rank and made him one of the greatest of reciters of Quran Kareem. In fact, the Muhajirun, when they migrated to Medina Munawwara before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated, who was their Imam? Salim. Their Imam was Salim. For all the Muhajirun, they used to pray salah behind him. He was a very good reciter and he had a beautiful voice. His Mawla, that is his master who freed him, was Abu Hudayfa. Okay, who's Abu Hudayfa? Do you remember the Battle of Badr took place? And there's 3 Sahaba that came forward from the Muslim side to fight. Who are they? Hamza, Ali, and Ubayd ibn al-Harith radiyallahu anhum, right? Who did they fight against? Who were the 3 people they fought against? Walid, Utbah, and Shayba. His name was Utbah bin Rabi'. Utbah bin Rabi''s son was Abu Hudayfa. His father died and was killed as a non-Muslim in the Battle of Badr. And Abu Hudayfa, his son, was on the other side. One of the first people to accept Islam. Right? So this Abu Hudayfa and his Mawla and his freed slave Salim both became the brothers Islamic brothers, Muslim brothers of Abbad bin Bishr Radhi-Allahu ta'ala anhu. So they stayed with him at his house, and he took care of all their needs and supported them financially in any other way they needed until they had enough to stand on their own. How much love and respect did the Sahaba have for Abbad bin Bishr, inshallah? We will talk about that. Inshallah, I should have said inshallah now, I said it before. We will talk about that next week, inshallah. We'll mention two stories. One related to Abdullah bin Zubair, what he said about Abbad bin Bishr, and number two, what Umar ibn Khattab said and did about Abbad bin Bishr radiyallahu anhu. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خير. أحسنت الله.